Hi, I'm Ben Ferguson, and welcome to your AMAC Weekly News. First up, liberals have a new plan that they want you to get behind that would only cost you $3 trillion of your tax money. So what's in it? Well, a whole bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with coronavirus and a whole lot of money for things in the liberal agenda. I'll tell you more about that in a second. Also, Dr. Anthony Fauci appeared in a coronavirus hearing in the U.S. Senate, and he didn't exactly get the warm greeting he probably wanted. In fact, one U.S. senator literally challenged him, arguing that his words are not the, quote, end all for America. I'll tell you what that senator had to say about this and why he said it in just a moment. And finally, we have our very own AMAC Action President, Bob Carlstrom, joining us to discuss the latest on the states opening back up and the fight for local cities to do what's best for them, despite what the government at the state or the national level are demanding. Quick reminder, if you haven't joined AMAC, do it right now. Also, make sure you share this video with your family and friends on social media. Your AMAC Weekly News starts right now. The latest proposal from liberals in the House will go down as the largest stimulus package in the history of the United States. This $3 trillion stimulus package is being marketed by Nancy Pelosi as the HEROES Act. Now, I mean, who wouldn't be in favor of voting for something called the HEROES Act that is allegedly aimed at assisting heroes on the front line dealing with COVID-19? The only problem with that is it has nothing to do with that. Yet Nancy Pelosi had her big announcement and tried to claim that this is all about protecting and giving back to America's heroes. Take a look at this from C-SPAN.
We must have empathy for our heroes, the healthcare workers, for how exhausted and how stressed they are in doing their jobs. Add to that, they may lose their jobs in this economy. We must also empathize with the pain of families who do not know where their next meals are coming from and how to pay next month's rent. It is imperative that we address the needs of the American people with clarity on how we proceed. That is why today, House Democrats are introducing the HEROES Act, named for our heroes, whose provisions are largely based on the 4 previous bipartisan bills we have passed. The HEROES Act focuses on 3 pillars: opening our economy safely and soon, honoring our heroes, and then putting much-needed money into the pockets of the American people. We all know that we must put more money in the pockets of the American people. This is not only necessary for their survival, but it is also a stimulus to the economy. Direct payments, unemployment insurance, rental and mortgage help, and food and student loan assistance, among other things, are essential to relieve the fear that many families are facing.
Now, again, Nancy Pelosi is sitting there acting like this $3 trillion bill is going to just help people that are in need. The only problem with that is it's not really going to be helping many Americans at all. It's actually about calling it a HEROES Act and instead really sneaking in a bunch of liberal pork barrel spending along with liberal policies that the left is obsessed with. Now, yes, to be fair, it does call for $200 billion in additional spending to help the Heroes Fund to ensure essential workers who have put their health and safety on the line receive hazard pay during the pandemic. On the other hand, that's only $200 billion of $3 trillion that they're proposing. Now, what is in the legislation that you should be concerned about? Well, the legislation includes rent and mortgage assistance and more direct payments for people in our country deemed worthy by liberals, but it falls short of the demands they wanted, such as $2,000 in reoccurring monthly payments. Also, a 15% increase in SNAP benefits, also known as food stamps. Aid for the marijuana industry, have no idea how that deals with COVID-19. Also, an EPA study on pollution and health. More funding for the arts and humanities, and funding for mail-in voting, election assistance, and the U.S. Postal Service. Now, can anyone tell me how any of that will solve the COVID-19 crisis? Let's take a moment to focus in on that mail-in voting portion as well. According to reports, Pelosi's $3 trillion stimulus bill would, quote, eliminate state requirements for voter ID and require states to accept mail-in ballots up to 10 days after the election. So let me explain and break down what was just proposed by Nancy Pelosi. It is to have an official election day. Then you get to see the outcome of that election. And then you can alter the outcome of that election, change that election for up to 10 days by mail if you don't like what happened and you still have a vote to cast. In other words, we don't actually have a real election day anymore. We just get to see the election results from that day, and then people that chose not to vote on election day have the ability to then vote to alter and change that election. In translation, this is all an attempt for liberals to be able to steal elections in 2020 where they don't like the outcome. How would you even do a campaign this way? Imagine if you're running for office, you win an election, and your opponent then puts ads out saying, please hurry up and vote in the next 10 days by mail if you didn't, because I just lost. It is impossible for that to actually be a free and fair election. Now, they are spending your hard-earned dollars on ideas that would only help their party's campaigns and agenda. $3 trillion of it. Now, in the meantime, they're also pushing our country further into debt in order to force Americans to become more and more and more dependent on the government for survival. Now, we have a president in the Oval Office who is consistently fighting for our country and its people. And we need to join together to fight for him as this re-election comes even closer. It is vital to ensure our elections remain free and fair for all citizens and to keep our country great. AMAC is here to make sure that we fight so that this will never happen, no matter what the left calls it or how much money they try to take from the American workers. Dr. Anthony Fauci was called out during Tuesday's Senate Health Committee hearing when he was challenged by Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. Now, Paul is currently the only U.S. senator to have a confirmed case of COVID-19. And he flat out said that the public health response to the pandemic has been riddled with, quote, wrong prediction after wrong prediction. He also said that Fauci should not be the one making decisions outside of his area of expertise. Now, during the hearing, Paul brought up the topic of reopening schools in the fall. To this, Fauci said that there is still much that researchers don't know about this virus, and they shouldn't be, quote, cavalier in reopening institutions too quickly. Paul then took a moment to throw out some numbers about how low the mortality rate really is for the age group of 0 to 18 years old. According to Paul, who is an ophthalmologist, the mortality rate is close to 0 for this age group. He then went on to flat out say that Fauci shouldn't be the, quote, end all when making decisions. Watch this from MSNBC.
I don't think any of us are certain when we do all these modelings. There's been more people wrong with modeling than right. We're opening up a lot of economies around the U.S., and I hope that people who are predicting doom and gloom and saying, oh, we can't do this, there's going to be a surge, will admit that they were wrong if there isn't a surge, because I think that's what's going to happen. In rural states, we never really reached any sort of pandemic levels in Kentucky and other states. We have less deaths in Kentucky than we have in an average flu season. It's not to say this isn't deadly, but really outside of New England, we've had a relatively benign course for this virus nationwide. So I think we ought to have a little bit of humility in our belief that we know what's best for the economy. And as much as I respect you, Dr. Fauci, I don't think you're the end all. I don't think you're the one person that gets to make a decision. We can listen to your advice, but there are people on the other side saying there's not going to be a surge and that we can safely open the economy, and the facts will bear this out. But if we keep kids out of school for another year, what's going to happen is the poor and underprivileged kids who don't have a parent that's able to teach them at home are not going to learn for a full year. And I think we ought to look at the Swedish model, and we ought to look at letting our kids get back to school. I think it's a huge mistake if we don't open the schools in the fall.
Now, in response to Senator Paul's comments, Dr. Fauci made it clear that he is not here to give economic advice. Fauci explained that he doesn't, quote, give advice about anything other than public health. Well, I want you to hear from Dr. Fauci what his concerns are with regard to sending children back to school too quickly. Take a look at this from the same hearing on MSNBC.
Children presenting with COVID-19 who actually have a very strange inflammatory syndrome, very similar to Kawasaki's syndrome, I think we better be careful if we are not cavalier in thinking that children are completely immune to the deleterious effects. So again, you're right in the numbers that children in general do much, much better than adults and the elderly, and particularly those with underlying conditions. But I am very careful and hopefully humble in knowing that I don't know everything about this disease, and that's why I'm very reserved in making broad predictions.
We all know that there is a lot that we don't know about COVID-19, but is that enough to continue to shut down our economy and our education system indefinitely because of fear? We also don't know if there is long-term protection for those who have recovered from the virus. Now, although Dr. Fauci noted that recovered patients are likely to have a degree of protection, regardless, we as a country are facing a serious choice between our economic freedom and the potential for an even greater health crisis. There is a possibility that we could also battle this out using social distancing, and now a lot of common sense protection. This is something that we will have to decide as more evidence comes to the forefront. Don't worry, AMAC will keep you updated on the latest coronavirus news, whether it is good news or tough news for us and the economy. In two big shocking stories this week, you have Nancy Pelosi coming out with the CARES Act, where she's trying to allow you to vote after an election has ended. And also Rand Paul takes on Dr. Fauci. Joining me now to talk about this is Bob Carlstrom. He is the president of AMAC Action. Bob, I appreciate you coming on the show today to talk about this. And let's get straight into what Nancy Pelosi has done. They have put a $3 trillion spending package together. Under the disguise of it being called the CARES Act that is supposed to be taking care of people. In reality, this is about altering and changing the next election. One of the shocking things in this bill is taking away the state's rights to choose if you have to show an ID to vote. The other thing that's even more shocking is they say that your mail-in ballot should be able to be accepted for up to 10 days after the election. No information in there about a postmark date of it having to be postmarked before the election, which means you could give the election results to the American people, and then voters could change the result of the election based on if they liked or did not like the outcome of an election. I've never seen anything this crazy in my life, yet this is exactly what Nancy Pelosi is doing, all under the cover of COVID-19.
Well, it's a classic let's not a good crisis go to waste thing that's so reminiscent of years back. And this really is, the entire bill is an election year ploy, 1,796 pages, released yesterday in draft form. And it's a real genuine nanny state assault, if you would, on constitutional federalism, the rights of states, the efforts to alter the election outcome. It's just crass. And it's really inexcusable.
This bill, also, one of the most shocking things about it is if you're really trying to help people, and there's clearly bipartisan support for helping people when it comes to dealing with COVID-19, the economic fallout from this, why didn't you sit down with Republicans and write this bill? Not a single Republican had input, from what we understand, in this $3 trillion spending package. No one was invited to the table with Nancy Pelosi. They just said, here it is, and we want to move forward on this. And I think the political side of this is they're going to say, if anyone stands up to this bill, you are against caring for the American people, hence why they named it the CARES Act.
No, Ben, you're exactly right. You know, this is something for everybody. Again, an election year ploy. There's a broad range of relief measures that are included in that. I think everybody who had an idea got it included in the bill. It was a backroom deal put out there for the very reason you say. And it's not responsible. It's totally irresponsible. You know, you really need to target on where the critical needs are in this crisis, in this pandemic crisis. And you need to also recognize that there is another body called the United States Senate, and there is a president. And that's what we're going to see, I think, in the weeks ahead, is where the Senate and maybe responsible House leadership and the president and his representatives sit down to try to work out something that's really needed. I also give great credit to the administration in saying, you know, we're still managing the money that was appropriated already and handing that out. Let's see how the things are working out in the next few weeks before we go further. Because, you know, this is the most humongous overdraft in history. And it really needs to be checked.
A lot of Americans, and I don't think it's just Republicans or conservatives. I think it's people that are putting politics aside, and they're really now having to fight for their livelihood when it comes to opening back up. A perfect example of a socialist leadership is L.A. Los Angeles County is now saying they're going to be closed for 3 more months, and many people in L.A. are responding to this. Liberals that are responding to this saying, what is the point of keeping us closed down for 3 more months in quarantine, right? Because they're talking about 3 months of quarantine. If when we come outside, there's nothing left to go out and do. There's no businesses left. There's no restaurants left. There's no small businesses left. You're destroying the economic freedom which Americans are supposed to have. And this is happening in LA where they're saying you're going to be under self-quarantine for 3 more months.
You know, you're exactly right, Ben. I mean, we don't have a country if we don't have an economy, because the government is overhead on the economy. And what you're seeing here is the government mindset, ignorant of the economy and the importance of GDP, jobs. The job creators are not the government. The job creators are the businesses and investment. And so this reflects, I guess, profound ignorance, if you will, about our economic system and why it is, in fact, the cradle that enables our Constitution and this government to thrive and prosper.
I want to ask you real quick about Senator Rand Paul. He clearly struck a chord with the American people this week when he really kind of challenged the power of Dr. Fauci and explaining to Dr. Fauci, look, you're saying things for the entire nation, and North Dakota is very different than L.A., and L.A. is very different from Wyoming, and Wyoming's very different from New York City. And the idea that we're going to keep this country shut down uniformly is unrealistic. It violates states' rights and even local municipalities, and it clearly struck a chord with people nationwide.
Senator Paul was absolutely correct in raising this. Dr. Fauci has provided great service to the American people as a physician, a clinician, an NIH official, his service on the president's task force, and we all deeply appreciate his perspective. But he's a physician. He's not an economist by his own self-admission. And under our constitutional system, the ball now lies with the governors to define how they're going to implement a reopening of the economy, permit businesses to re-enter, permit people to go back to their jobs, and permit the rebound to occur. And so while I respect Dr. Fauci's opinion, and he's absolutely right as a clinician, it has to be a greater balance there too in terms of the economy and getting our country moving again.
It's important. If we don't get it moving very shortly in a big way, we're going to be in a lot of trouble for a long time, and people are going to lose everything they ever worked for. Bob, I really appreciate you and what AMAC Action is doing for the members of AMAC. You as the president have done an incredible job making sure that when these important decisions are being made, that the voice of AMAC members is being heard in Washington and with governors and other elected officials around the country. And we really appreciate what AMAC Action is doing. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Ben.
That's it for this edition of your AMAC Weekly News. Quick reminder, please share this video with your family and friends on social media. And most importantly, if you haven't joined AMAC or renewed your AMAC membership, do it now so you can receive this show and access to our amazing member benefits. We just added Teledoc service as one of our member benefits, so make sure you take advantage of that. You also get the AMAC magazine. And most importantly, AMAC represents you and more than 2 million other conservatives on Capitol Hill every day. I'm Ben Ferguson, and I'll see you back next week for our next episode.